It was June in the year 2020 when this reporter first signed up for a YouTube account. It was a few months before I started producing any content, but just the same, I immediately started receiving the monthly creator newsletter. In fact, the first one arrived just a day or two after I had signed up. And what was the topic of said newsletter? Was it welcome to YouTube? Was it tips for new creators? Was it helpful links if you require assistance? No, it wasn't any of those things. It was help us celebrate Drag Appreciation Month. And I see some of you grinning right now because you remember getting that email too. Now, it's easy these days to lose sight of how quickly a complete societal upheaval can take place, and after they're over, we only then tend to remember where things ever were before it. But remember and consider that back in the late spring of 2020, there wasn't anything remotely like the veritable drag queen industrial complex that we have today. Nobody had ever heard of a thing called Drag Queen Story Hour back then. There wasn't a Yogi Berra-looking dude in a woman admiral's uniform running around the White House telling everybody to go castrate their son and hack their daughter's breasts off. And most crucially, normal people were still allowed to be weirded out by the sight of big, hairy, hulking male sex perverts sashaying around their local elementary schools in their finest evening gowns. Now, it's amazing to consider that things were so different such a short time ago, but then we lost a whole hell of a lot in 2020, both culturally and materially, and nearly all of it we gave away voluntarily through our own insistence on complying with things we damn well knew were wrong. So the next time there's a ruggedly handsome man on your YouTube imploring you not to comply or else you'll be really sorry, you may do well to listen closely to what he's saying, because it's an inconvenient truth about the human condition. Bad people can't do bad things unless good people let them. So that was my first introduction to being a YouTube creator. Help us celebrate Drag Appreciation Month. Learn about the history of drag. Get pointers for making your own drag videos. Hell, maybe I just should have gone with it and put on the damn evening gown. I'd probably have 2 million subs and a job with the State Department by now. But you know who was paying close attention when YouTube sent that email? Dylan freaking Mulvaney, that's who. And if you don't know who Dylan Mulvaney is, I think I really would rather not give a detailed explanation, but then I guess I don't really have to. He is a guy who tried every conceivable narcissistic attention-getting behavior that he could think of because he wanted to be a social media celebrity instead of getting a real job, because that's just what you do now when you're a kid in your 20s. So where kids in former generations wanted to be the president, or an astronaut, or a rock star, or a big league ball player, the top rung of the professional ladder for today's youngsters is TikTok influencer. And as much as I would like to be joking about that, there actually is polling data to confirm the truth of that statement. Depressing as that is for anyone who wishes to see modern society still exist 50 years from now. So there's Dylan Mulvaney just toiling away in obscurity as an obnoxious, flamboyant gay man, grasping at any possible thing he can think of to get his view counts higher, including the obligatory white male guilt videos that every white male liberal is required to make. So there's a lot of 5- and 6-year-old Instagram videos of Dylan Mulvaney making weepy apologies for his white cisgender privilege and other such made-up nonsense, but none of it made a dent. Nobody gave a damn about anything this guy did because it was so painfully obvious that he was just some unfunny, untalented hack who felt himself entitled to fame and celebrity. And then YouTube sent out that creator newsletter in June of 2020, and Dylan Mulvaney looked at himself in the mirror and said, "You have been doing this all wrong, girlfriend. Let's put that dress on and get down to making our fortune, baby." And son of a bitch, would you look at that, from the very first video where he put on the wig and the makeup and the dress and began his new career as a grotesque caricature of what he thinks a woman is? This dude's life has never been the same. Just in the last 2 weeks, he's met with the president and the vice president in the White House, and he had Drew Barrymore kneeling at his feet on national television as if he is an object of some sort of religious devotion. But don't you dare go thinking Dylan Mulvaney is living a charmed life just because he's rich and famous and celebrated by all the fashionable people from coast to coast, because that is not how this works. Dylan Mulvaney, you see, is a victim. He is a victim of something called transphobia. And if you're thinking right now, but wait, didn't he first cynically appropriate womanhood and then cynically appropriate transgenderism at the same time? Well, I'm glad you asked, because yes, he did. Now, nothing could be more transparent about the scam this guy is working. He wanted to be internet famous, and he was willing to do absolutely anything to make it happen. There's even a whole 6-year paper trail of video evidence showing how fake and cynical this guy's whole act is. But you're not allowed to mention any of that, or else you will be attacking the LGBTQEIEIO movement and community. It's like the origin of the China virus, or how many moles were at the Capitol on January 6th for the FBI, or why 5 states stopped counting on election night over a busted water main in Atlanta. We just don't talk about any of these things. But I have much that I want to say about the cult of transgenderism, so I'm just going to say it. And here's the first item I want to discuss. Is there no longer such a thing as transvestitism? Because it seems like that line has been blurred into irrelevance, but should it be? Ponder that question, get back to me in 5 seconds. Jim Eagle, stop trying to squeeze into that bustier and hit the damn music. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we don't have a drag queen story hour, but there is a nifty dressmaking workshop every second Thursday. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I'm your eponymous host and humble servant. So, like I said, let's talk about this transvestite versus transgender thing. Now, let's stick with the previous example of Mr. Dylan Mulvaney. This dude is fairly matter-of-fact about the fact that he is still packing the wedding tackle that God gave him. In fact, I think he calls it an inside-out vagina or some creepy, weird-ass thing like that, but I digress. He's had a bunch of cosmetic surgery on his face to give him a slightly less masculine appearance. I won't say slightly more feminine because that would be an insult to femininity. And I'm not sure whether he's a bra stuffer or he actually has had a pair of fake tits implanted. I don't really care, don't want to know, but here's the point I'm getting at. Up until like 5 minutes ago, it was commonly understood by everybody that drag queens are dudes. And if you're a dude who pretends to be a woman in public and you haven't had your sex organs altered, you're a drag queen, as opposed to being transgender. Let's take RuPaul for an example, the most famous drag queen in history, if I'm not mistaken. I remember when he first became a well-known public figure, which it's got to be 25 years ago now, if you can imagine that. Now, whenever an interviewer would use female pronouns when talking to him, he would jump in and immediately correct the person. He would say, nope, I am a man, baby. I am 100% all male. I am not a woman, never claimed to be a woman. I am a big, fabulous, flamboyant, gay man. And you have to respect that. I mean, to the extent that a clearly very troubled man with a variety of crippling sexual paraphilias can never warrant respect as such, but RuPaul is taking a rationally defensible approach to what he is and what he does, and it's a position that at least has some tangential relationship with reality. And the other reason I bring up RuPaul is because by his own criteria, and he's the most famous drag queen in the world, Dylan Mulvaney is also a drag queen and not transgender. Because the two cases are exactly the same as a physiological matter. Both men have intact male genitalia and they have had cosmetic facial surgery so as to appear less masculine. There is nothing you can point to and say, well, RuPaul is just a drag queen, but Dylan Mulvaney is a transgender woman. Kamala Harris, for her part, seems totally unbothered by that distinction, which likely comes as a surprise to no one since she's probably too stupid to grasp it in the first place. Kamala Harris wrote Dylan Mulvaney a very, very fawning, loving letter after his visit to the White House. And let's say we regale ourselves by reading it out, shall we? Because as good as I am, there's no way I could ever do this thing justice by only describing it. Quote, Dear Ms. Mulvaney, I send you my warmest greetings as you celebrate your 365th day of living authentically. Thank you for courageously sharing your story and your journey. I appreciate your continued advocacy for transgender equality, including your visit to the White House last year. Through your work as an activist and advocate for the LGBTQI+ community, you continue to break barriers and inspire young people across our nation and around the world. While we have made incredible progress from advancing marriage equality to enacting historic protections for transgender people, the fight is far from over. Our administration stands with the LGBTQI+ community in the ongoing struggle for true equity and equality and against hate and discrimination in all forms. I am grateful for your dedication and courage, and I hope you continue to use your platform to spread positivity and create change. I look forward to seeing all that you will accomplish in the future." End quote. Again, this is a man who is still a man in every legal sense of the word, who started impersonating a woman because he had exhausted every other avenue for becoming a world-famous internet celebrity. This man's artistic idiom is indistinguishable from the performers in a blackface minstrel show. And if it sounds harsh to describe it in those terms, good, because we need to start describing these things more harshly. Pussyfooting around it and being polite and accommodating hasn't done us a whole hell of a lot of good, has it? 3 years ago, could anybody have pictured dumb liberal women actually submitting their children to be publicly ogled and molested in public by cross-dressing male sex perverts? No! They couldn't, but today it's perfectly commonplace. Just last weekend, the Attorney General of the state of New York hosted, personally, a drag queen story hour. Could you have pictured that 3 years ago? Me either. But here we have Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, pretending this drag queen performance artist is actually a woman, and worse yet, that his revolting kabuki theater version of womanhood is actually advancing the cause of women's rights. God, Kamala, just Kamala. I don't know how it is that you became a district attorney or a state senator or a state attorney general or a U.S. senator and then somehow insinuated yourself onto a presidential ticket despite not being someone that any reasonable person would trust to run a Dairy Queen for 8 hours, if we're being honest. But just the same, I want to thank you. Not just because you're the reason I pray for Joe Biden's good health each night, because I actually hate you for that. But I want to thank you for being such a powerful, living, breathing illustration of what the absolute end-stage, worst-case scenario of affirmative action looks like. The warnings, we had the warnings for years. If affirmative action is left unchecked, we might wind up with shockingly stupid, unqualified people in really important jobs. Well, Kamala Harris is exhibit number 1. The warning was valid. It ought to have been heeded, because I think we forget all too often what the original rationale was behind affirmative action. The idea was that there are eminently well-qualified non-white male candidates who are not being considered for jobs they should be considered for. So we need racial quotas in order to redress that supposed injustice. And whether any of that was actually true on a systemic level is still very much open to debate, but that's just another orthodoxy that we're not allowed to question. You know how it is. So when Joe Biden announced he was going to choose a black woman for his running mate, he used the same justification that the affirmative action crowd has been using for these last 50 years. That there are so many well-qualified black women vice presidential candidates out there, and they've been so unfairly excluded that it is time to fix that. And then he had his people do an exhaustive search of all the stupendously well-qualified black female candidates before settling on Kamala Harris, who is half Punjabi, who grew up in Canada, who literally has 0 American ancestors, who probably is the dumbest senator since Joe Biden. All right, I guess. That's what 50 years of affirmative action gets us. The California cackler in all of her awkward glory. But back to the transgender thing. I think we can see pretty clearly at this point that the tranny train is well and truly on fire. The conductor and the brakeman are both dead, and that thing is careening toward Eastwood Ravine at a high rate of speed. It's a weird fad and social contagion that's about to die as quickly as it emerged on the scene in the first place, because that is what all fads and social contagions do, ultimately. The difference this time is that we have allowed children to be dragged into it, and worst of all, we've allowed the basic compact between adults and children to be tossed aside. The compact that all societies have, no matter what their moral value system, that says we, the grown-ups, we all agree that the children have to be prevented from making drastically life-altering decisions when they don't have the experience or the resultant wisdom to appreciate the potential consequences thereof. For thousands and thousands and thousands of years, all societies throughout the world agreed on this. And then all of a sudden, one day in 2020 comes the word that no, if your kid starts acting gender confused, and this has no relation to the fact that all they hear at school is how great and fashionable and awesome it is to be transgender and how it is an easy ticket to happiness and fulfillment, then you have to immediately start that kid on cross-sex hormones and begin searching for a clinic that will agree to mutilate their sex organs. If you took your 14-year-old kid to get a tattoo, not only would the tattoo artist refuse to do it, but he probably would call the cops on you for suspicion of child abuse. And good for him, rightly so, because he should. But if you take that same kid into some place called a gender-affirming care clinic and say you want to get his testicles hacked off, ain't nobody gonna call the cops. They will hand you a nice glossy brochure and tell you about how brave and courageous you are and walk you through the whole series of steps you need to do in order to ruin your son's life forever and turn him into a weird androgynous Ken doll. And yeah, sure, I realize full well that everything I'm saying here is probably preaching to the choir more or less, but there's a responsible party I want to talk to here. And it's the responsible party we don't talk about often enough. Men. Normal, ordinary, everyday men, husbands, fathers, brothers, sons, uncles, nephews. Because will somebody tell me what the hell happened to chivalry? Isn't it our duty as men to safeguard the honor of women and the dignity of womanhood? So when someone makes a mockery of women and a caricature of womanhood, aren't we morally obliged as chivalrous men to shut that nonsense down? Aren't we required at the very least to register our disapproval of such things when I see an idiot, narcissist, self-promoting douchebag like Dylan Mulvaney using womanhood as a ridiculous theater routine, as a venue for his stupid, offensive performance art, as a vehicle for getting himself rich and famous? Well, I see that as an affront to my wife and my daughters and my mother and every other woman to whom I owe the duty of chivalry. Why again am I supposed to celebrate the mockery and the degradation of womanhood? And speaking of idiot, narcissist, self-promoting douchebags pissing all over the whole concept of womanhood, I'm supposed to celebrate it when William Thomas beats a bunch of girls in a swimming race and then swings his dick up in their faces in the locker room afterward? I'm supposed to view that as a triumph for women's rights? Are you serious here? Women shouldn't have to fight this battle for themselves. If they do, then that is to our eternal shame as the men who claim to love and appreciate and value and cherish them. When women are dishonored and marginalized, it is men who should take offense. When womanhood is mocked and satirized and commoditized by sleazy, dishonest men, it's decent, honest men who should be the ones to handle it. By allowing the drag queen transgender thing to get to this point, we men have failed in our duty of chivalry. And we owe it to the women we honor to start making it right. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have any insight into divorce or broken homes or single parenting or any of that stuff. I have been in the same relationship since I was 15. My kids have a mother and a father who are married to one another, which is the right of every kid to have. The point being, if you're a father, you have to be a father. I'm sorry the marriage or the relationship didn't work out, but you have to be a man and do your duty. Because you want to know what I think each time I see one of those awful, awful drag queen story hour videos where there are 35 moms in the room and not a single dad? I think, do these kids' fathers know where they are? And if not, why not? If they did, would they do anything about it? You can either be a man and do the right thing at the right time, or you can leave yourself with a lot of very difficult questions to ponder later on in life. Especially when the wages of your apathy and inaction are staring right back at you, as they may well be. Being a man, acting like a man, doing a man's duty, it doesn't have anything to do with ostentatious displays of cartoonish masculine virility. If you want to be told shit like that your value as a man is derived from how many strippers and fast cars you can collect, there's plenty of dumbass Andrew Tate videos you can go watch. Being a man means having the courage to call things what you know they are, the moral clarity to do things you know are right, and the self-assurance to laugh at any dumbass who calls you names because of it. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. If you're a man, do one chivalrous thing for every woman you love. I'll see you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.